Okay, welcome to another edition of the Culture Class Podcast, the podcast where we get to interact with people from different backgrounds and get to learn about a host of other cultures. I've been doing this podcast now for 2 years plus. I think we're 2 years old in December last month. And in all this time, to be honest, I've been trying to look for an Indigenous or Native American to interview. And I guess that wish was fulfilled today. So welcome to the podcast, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks for reaching out.
Most definitely. And before we started recording, we are just chit-chatting and you were saying how you were craving for snow. I was like, who are you? Who does that?
Well, I hardly get a chance to have my snow bath. It's something Navajo people do is we take snow baths.
Nice. And I saw that and it's interesting you said that because I saw a video about that on Twitter one time. And when you say snow bath, is this when they put the baby, kind of like roll them up in the snow a little bit? Kind of thing. That's an interesting place to start from. Because like I said, I was scrolling down Twitter one day, I think it was like a year ago, and someone was having a snow bath and there were all these, I guess you can call them like, I don't know, like white Americans or whatever, saying, no, how would you do that to a child? Like you're endangering the child. And there was, a slew of Native Americans on the Twitter thread who went ahead to like educate people that no, this is actually like some kind of ritual in our culture. And this is what it signifies and things like that. It just goes to show, because I'm Nigerian, right? And, when people see us do things like, I don't know, eat some certain foods with our hands or do different things, they tend not to understand because that was not their upbringing. I'm sure we'll have a lot of conversations about that. But can you do a snow bath as an adult as well, or?
Yeah. So they're definitely still practice. It's supposed to be something that you like begin as a young child and then you continue to do on into your older adults, even elderly years if you can, and until you're comfortable. But yeah, we actually, myself and my family, we did it earlier when New Haven had a snow, maybe a couple months ago now. It's like in November.
Oh, wait. Yeah. So you can do a snow bath as a family? Is it supposed to be like every year, every 5 years? How does that go?
It's supposed to be after the first snowfall. You want to be able to go out with, it's usually like the day or so after the first snow. And then you just, basically we went out. I mean, I didn't go like naked or anything. I had like shorts and a tank top on and we, rubbed snow on our legs. We rub it on our stomachs. We rub it on our arms up into our face. And then we roll in the snow a few times, or at least that's how I do it.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure no kid is going to complain about that one.
But we did have some strange looks from the neighbors, but it was fine.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's get into this. So let me start with your name, right? And I intentionally didn't ask you this because I think I want to get it right. Let me see if I can pronounce this right. So your first name is Diana and your last name is Onco-ingyadet. I don't know if I got that right.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh my goodness, how close? How close? Not close at all.
I'll introduce myself really quickly if that's all right with you. Yat Diana Onco-ingyadet in she look at the net in the shle na apat sanamana she tchini de she na kongi gagura she sabi in the sky den na sha. So I said my name in there. I don't know if you caught it. But
I did. The first part of it.
Yeah. So our introductions for Diné people, so for Navajo people, we are a matrilineal society. So what we do is we introduce ourselves giving our clan, our maternal clan. And so I was telling you in Navajo that my mother is Lukat Diné, which is reed people. And so, that's the line that my family comes from. And then I'm born for, which is my father's side, Comanche or Numina. And so we're basically giving our mother's side, our father's side, and then we give our maternal grandfather and our paternal grandfather. So that is something that a lot of Diné people do. And we do that so that we can see who our family is in the room. But we also want to see I think the other part is you want to see who you're related to, so you don't you can see who you can date.
Oh, got it.
Marriage, you don't want to be related to anybody.
Interesting. That's pretty interesting. But do you have to start with your mother's side? Is there a particular significance about your maternal lineage in the Navajo tribe?
Yeah. Because we are a matrilineal society, the clan is what's passed down from mother to child. So that mother's clan is the primary identifier. And so I said I was Lukat Diné. And so anyone else that I meet in this world who is Lukat Diné, they're considered my family. They're like automatically, we're kin.
No matter how far removed that person is, if it's your sisters, uncles, daughters, you're just automatically kin.
Yeah. I actually had I had two students that are at Yale, and they're both related to me. So I was like,
interesting. Nice. Wow, that's pretty. So that means everyone is, I guess that makes sense because, like, in the natural sense of the world, even though a lot of people like rationalize this with nuclear family, like everyone is still part of some larger family, sometimes that they are not even aware of, that kind of thing. So I guess that's just a way of keeping everyone together. Well, okay, let's get into this real quick. We just let you guys have a taste of Diana's background there, but I want to ask you this. Let me start with this. So I checked out your website before the interview, and you describe yourself as a modern Indigenous Native American cisgender woman. So, and I wanted to peel back some of that a little bit. When you say you refer to yourself as a modern Indigenous woman, like what do you mean, like modern Indigenous? Obviously, from the way I even met you, obviously you cherish like your culture and you know you speak the language and things like that. But what does modern Indigenous mean?
I think in the way that I use it, I like to see myself as the way I present to the world. And so the way that I present myself to the world is I like to blend both things that we recognize as, I guess, modern American kind of fashion, so to speak, or, you know, even my education, I would consider like something like that to be of a modern sense, because I am lacking in other ways within my Indigenous identities, because I'm still growing in those areas. But I identify as an Indigenous person. My mother is Navajo, my father is Kiowa and Comanche. And so I feel like I just try to, everything I do, I'm always trying to blend both of those things at all times. So
that's interesting. And it's interesting, like I understood that pretty well. And I can even relate to that in a way because I'm Nigerian, right? I've spent some time here in the US, not a lot of time. I grew up back home in Nigeria, but I don't necessarily know how to speak the language and things like that. If I were to say I was a modern Bini person, Bini being my tribe back home in Nigeria, like some of my elders and some of my family members might not take likely to that. Is it kind of like the same thing? Because from what I understand or from what I can see from a spectator's perspective, Native Americans kind of like hold dear to a lot of their cultures. Calling yourself more than Indigenous or acting more than Indigenous, is that something that's kind of like, I don't want to say permissible, but how well have your family members digested that over the years?
I mean, I think I feel like what happened in a lot of the experiences I've had as a young person were that because I grew up in a multi-tribal family, it was always like, what, you know, community am I going to find myself a part of? Am I going to be part of my Kiowa family or my Navajo family? And, you know, being called things like, you know, half breed or like you're not full this or full that, which is
that within the culture as well?
From both Native and non-Native people, that was those were things that were kind of coming at me as a young person. Mm-hmm. And so you know, growing up, I finally had to just kind of think about my identity as like, whatever I do is Indigenous. Like, I don't have to be a certain way to be considered an Indigenous person. So once I defined it for myself, that was when I felt like free to just kind of be who I am and blend both what I enjoy and what I like to learn and what I like to say and sing and listen to, but also be an Indigenous person at all times. So that's how I feel like I move throughout the world.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. I guess it boils down to that whole conversation of, is culture supposed to evolve in a sense? And, you know, there are two sides of that story. Some people say, you know, culture isn't supposed to evolve, like there are traditions that have been embedded in society for millennia or for centuries or whatever. And some people say for those acts and practices to become tradition, it means they evolved from certain things and, you know, it's not supposed to stay stagnant. So I guess potato, that kind of makes sense. And I kind of relate to you definitely in that way as well. But let's break down where you're from. I know you mentioned that your maternal grandfather is Kiowa, your dad is Comanche, and your mom is Navajo. I guess you're closer to the Navajo side, if I could make that assumption. But let's break down like your lineage. Like you made mention of the fact that Native American societies is mostly maternal, but if you had to describe where you're from, tribe-wise, from location or geography or like ancestry, how would you do that?
It's interesting because I feel like it's sort of back to the question of the common one that everyone will be like, what's your hometown and where are you from? And I often answer that question by telling who my parents are and who my family is. And so, well, you can see how the paternal part of society has already embraced, like my last name is Kiowa, which is my dad's last name. So Onco-ingyadet is my last name. And
Onco-ingyadet is your last name. That's your dad's last name or first name? His last name.
That's my dad's last name.
Got it.
He was named. That last name comes from our my great grandfather. His name was Onco-ingyadet, and upon the way that I understand it is that upon contact with Kiowa people, Europeans couldn't pronounce it, so they just sort of they were just like, we're going to call you Onco, and then the rest got chopped and left out of the conversation. But also, I mean, it might have been just a shortened version. And so, yeah, my last name is Onco-ingyadet, but yeah, for Navajo people, if your mother is Navajo and you have your clan, you're Navajo. Like it makes no difference, like anything else really. I mean, you can of course you could be like Hopi as well, or you could be Ute, or you could be from another nearby tribe. But if your mother is Navajo, then you are, for all intents and purposes, you're Navajo. And so that's
what if your mother is mixed? Like you, for instance, like if you have kids.
I do have a son. I have a little boy.
There we go.
But his father is Navajo as well. And so, but he takes my mother's clan. So the clan that I have, he is now Diné. So that's the clan that would get passed down for him. I know it can get complicated because it's, there's a lot of different communities that are being brought in now. And for some communities, the Navajos actually do have names for them that they, will move into our community. So like, I think Mexican is Nakai. They have a name for that. Nakai. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of some other ones. If you say white, you say Biligana.
Biligana?
Biligana is like for someone who is European or white.
Biligana.
Which is, I actually found out what Biligana means in Navajo, or what it originally meant, and means the ones that we fought with. The ones we
that sounds about right. The ones who say they discovered the Columbuses and stuff like that.
Exactly.
That's pretty interesting. We'll get to all the holiday stuff. Obviously, a lot of history there between the indigenous people in America and, the would-be European settlers and things like that. But just to kind of like wrap up, like your tribe, where you're from. So that means, if I get it right, like it's difficult for you to say your hometown, is easier to say where your parents are from, because the concepts of states, the way they are in America, is a legal construct of the settlers, right? How in the Native American, I would say, community, how would you classify geographical land that belongs to certain tribes? Is there an ancient way where different tribes agree that, okay, like beyond the hill is this tribe, down the stream is that tribe, and how does that work in today's society with like 50 states or 48 states on the inland?
Well, I mean, you're right. So when I do answer where I'm from, I often say where my mother's. So I'll say where our family, which is Monument Valley, Utah. And you might have seen images of it. It's in a lot of movies, like John Wayne movies, Forrest Gump and stuff like that. They go to Monument Valley for all these picturesque scenes. So I usually say I'm from there, but I did grow up in Norman, Oklahoma was where I was from, where my father's side.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, in Oklahoma. And even, Oklahoma in itself, the name is, I believe, in Choctaw. I think it's in the Choctaw language, the term Oklahoma. It might be Chickasaw. I forget.
It's interesting you mentioned Forrest Gump and a couple of other pop culture references. Like I would say in my interaction with like Native American culture in pop culture, I tend to come across the Navajo specifically. Is it safe to say that's the biggest tribe? How many tribes are there? Is it even possible to quantify the number of tribes in the Native American community?
Yeah, there's a lot of data that's missing. That's definitely a theme among all Indigenous peoples, as there's a lot of missing data for us in every regard you can think of. But yes, Navajo, based on the records that the U.S. has right now, Navajo Nation is the largest.
Got it, got it. And how many people would you say are in the Navajo Nation? If you could make like an estimate.
It's like close to 400,000.
Oh wow, that's very little.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when I think about it in comparison to other tribes, so I'm just like, yeah, we get teased, because like they're like Navajos are everywhere.
Is that because Navajo people kind of like venture out beyond like Native American territory? Is that safe to say, or not really?
No, I don't think that. I think there's a lot of adventurous indigenous peoples out there. It's just, Navajos are that tribe that, kind of like the kid in the classroom you just want to like kind of pick on, it's all in good fun.
Interesting way of describing it. Interesting way. Okay, talk to me about growing up. So you grew up in Norman, Oklahoma. How was it like for you? Did you grow up in the Native American Reserve? Did you have like a regular upbringing? How soon did your parents start to bring to your consciousness like your heritage and your tribe, that kind of thing? How young were you?
Yeah, I was, I want to say I was, before I went into kindergarten, my parents were telling my sisters, and I grew up with, there's 4 girls and I'm the youngest. And my parents very early on, they always practiced this with us. They were like, remember, if anyone asks you, you're Native American and you're these 3 tribes. And they always tried to make sure that we remembered to never leave one of those out. So we always made sure that we mentioned all 3 of them. And I grew up in a very predominantly white community, very few Native people. It was usually my sisters and I who made up the larger portion of the natives in the school. My dad was definitely someone who wanted us to be a little more like progressive, I guess, in a sense. He told us, he was like, hey, you don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Our communities and our people were here first, and you can say it, but you don't have to. Just know that.
Oh, so that's a thing? I didn't know that was a thing, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, I never really thought about that. Because like in schools in what's now known as the United States, they have the Pledge of Allegiance said every morning in most public schools. I don't even know if they do that in other countries. Like, do they?
They do. Yeah, you sing like national anthem and you have like the pledge in Nigeria and most other countries as well in school. So
yeah,
that's interesting. What did your dad do? Like, what made him want to raise his kids as, like you say, progressive? Like, what was his plan for his kids? What did he do for work, and how was it growing up in that white community for you guys as kids?
Well, both my parents, they were working class. My mom, growing up, she was like, I think she worked in like the cafeteria at the local university. My dad at the time, he wasn't working, so he took care of the kids. But he just kind of picked up jobs around here and around there. But like he was a really big on history, and he was really into the American Indian movement. And so I learned about Leonard Peltier very early on. I learned about the AIM movement. My dad was just very passionate about making sure that we knew who we were and that we pre-existed the country that is here today. That was really important to him.
Yeah. I mean, a sense of history is often lost, if not like ingrained in kids when they're much younger. And there's a tendency for, culture and stuff to just be lost and history to be forgotten, especially for like a community as important as the Native American community. But did you get to go outside and play? Did you have any like weird interactions? I'm not sure if you like wore the clothes of the Navajo people and things like that when you were younger. Did you get teased in any way? Did adults pick on you, or did you just have like a regular childhood in Oklahoma, given that, Oklahoma is a state where we have, at least communities of Native Americans compared to other states?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Norman, it was a little isolating. I feel like most of the Native people that I knew were my family. And that was like the only time we really saw other Native people. And when we did, we were like, oh, you're just like,
really? Can you always tell? Like when you see someone who's Native American, like if the person doesn't put on like the jewelry or clothes, can you tell? Is there a way you can tell?
I mean, I feel like there's, you can. The native people in Oklahoma, I feel like they do look a little different than when I go to the Southwest in, the Navajo Nation. They just kind of look different, but I feel like I don't know, if I feel like they look like my cousin or something, then I'm just like, like, are they native? I don't
Like,
know.
oh.
But
Okay,
I mean,
so like it's
there was a
more
lot
like
of
physical features kind of thing. So it's not like you just know based on an aura around them or something.
no.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Well, what kind of community activities did you guys participate in growing up? I mean, when I was younger, watching cartoons, and I know most of those cartoons didn't do a good job in depicting all cultures, not just Native American, but I was introduced to the powwow. Like, did you have things like that growing up? What kind of community activities did you participate in as a kid?
The majority of, I think, my younger years was powwows. And so my family, we used to attend them. We used to, I used to dance fancy shawl when I was really, really tiny. And then as I got older, I went to a tribal boarding school for my high school.
Oh,
And
really?
I did, yes.
That must have been
And
interesting.
yeah, it was, I think overall it was good. It was good. But while I was there, we did a lot of like stomp dancing was practiced, and we played stickball. Stickball is so fun. Things like that.
Okay. What is stickball?
Well, have you heard of lacrosse?
I have heard of lacrosse.
So
Is
that's
that it?
actually what the game is, what it's inspired from stickball originally. But it's played differently. So there's, the Creek Nation or Muskogee people, they play differently from Choctaw, and they play differently from the Mohawks, and it's a little different all over.
Okay. So obviously, like your dad went a step further to make sure you guys were ingrained in the culture by sending you to a tribal boarding school. But how big was the school? Was it too big? And a boarding school, like I went to a boarding school. I went to a military boarding school, so I know how that can get. You have a lot of like elders and older people and people in higher classes to contend with. How was it like going to a tribal boarding school? Did you feel that had positive impact in you learning more about your people? How was it just like socially? Did you guys used to sneak away to go do stuff? I mean, this is years later, so you feel free to.
I really enjoyed it. I think it helped my transition into going to college, like, the whole moving away and being acclimated to be like my independent self. That really helped, I think. But I really enjoyed it because I could just focus on like just my studies, and I focused a lot on trying to make sure I found like scholarships when it was time for me to go to college, all of those things. And everyone there was Native. And so I met a lot of my lifelong friends there.
Nice.
Yeah. So like I'm still very close with a good group of them today.
Would you say it was a big school? Like how many students do you think were there at any one given time? Like 1,000, less?
No, yeah, my graduating class was only about 110, I think. So it wasn't too bad. It's probably in total like 400 or 500 students together. But they've expanded it, so it's no longer just 9, 10, 11, 12. It's I think 6, 7, and 8 as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's owned and operated by the Cherokee Nation, so they teach Cherokee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Was it free to go to that school or no? It was. And it's interesting. Let me kind of follow up with that, since you talked about your graduating class, to questions that might be somewhat ignorant, but just by way of me trying to understand more about your culture, your heritage, where you're from. You mentioned about studying hard to kind of like get scholarships into the university. So I know it's like kind of like wrong to use one scenario to kind of like judge a whole people, but you have situations where when I went to college, I went to college in DC, and some people try to claim like 1/16th or 1/32nd Native American or 1/18th Native American, so they can get some scholarship, tuition reimbursement and things like that. And it's generally like out there in the ethos that, if you're Native American, then you might not necessarily have to spend a dime on school. Like, how easy is it to like get was it to get scholarships when you were graduating and trying to go to college? Did you have the impression that, oh, I can pretty much go to any school I want because, everyone is looking for kind of like Native American students, or you still had to like put in that work to get what you want kind of thing?
Oh man, that is probably the most infuriating stereotype for me, because I've been in school for so long now. We do not go to college free. That is an absolute false narrative that for whatever reason people like to just eat it up, but it's not true in any sense.
Yeah.
Certain tribes can offer funding to their tribal members, and the funding is very depends. Like my tribe gives a little bit, but not in comparison to some tribes who are smaller and they just have a little bit more funding. There are certain scholarship programs that are for Native American students only, but it's difficult to find all these opportunities and to be eligible for all of them. But you also have tribal colleges and universities. So I don't know if you're aware of those kinds of situations, but there are tribal colleges, tribal universities that exist.
Oh, what is a popular one? I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, Diné College is the first tribal college in what's now known as the United States. So that's the oldest one, I suppose. But it's completely run by Native people, by Navajo people, and they have their own curriculum design. They have language courses, they have culture courses, and
nice.
Not just Navajo people go there. I've met people who've gone there who are non-Navajo or non-Native for that matter.
Nice. And what about my last ignorant question, I promise. What about the 18 money? Like, from what I understand, like certain tribes, particularly tribes who like have casinos. I'm not sure if all tribes participate in the gaming industry, but there was just documentary I watched that in certain tribes, when people turn like 18, or most like high school seniors are like giving a bunch of money, like, I don't know, ranging from like 20 to like 40 or 50K. Is that like a thing? Is it spread across all tribes, or just like a subset?
No, yeah, that's 100% not true for every Native person that is part of a federally recognized tribe. That's not true. My tribe, we didn't have casinos until more recent, and that it was a huge controversial topic for Navajo people. And a lot of that money doesn't ever even go directly to people. It goes to services. It goes to education. It goes to, social programs and those kinds of things benefit the Navajo as a whole. But some tribes, so you have like Eastern Band Cherokee of North Carolina, they do give out what is called per cap to their citizens. And so some tribes have it and some do not. I got nothing when I turned 18. Got like a thumbs up, maybe. I don't know.
Thumbs up. Or pat on the back kind of thing. Oh, interesting. So you eventually went to college and you spent a lot of time in school. You eventually went on to get your PhD, and I guess, congratulations are in order. That's like a couple of months old now. But I could see like from your profile that you had gone to college to study things relating to Indigenous people. So whether that's Indigenous studies or organizational leadership, is there a theme there? Is there a plan there? Why did you decide you wanted to study about Native American culture, like in an educational setting in that sense? Or do you have plans to kind of like go back to teach or help, Native American students in the future? What was the reason behind your education?
Yeah, so I chose my specific program at Northern Arizona University. It's called Applied Indigenous Studies. And the biggest reason why I chose that, and I'm so glad I chose it for my undergraduate, is because they focus on indigeneity across the world. And so the curriculum was designed for us to understand, respect, and appreciate Indigenous peoples, not within the domestic, United States. It was like everywhere: Canada, Mexico, South
Nice.
America, but all over. And I had never, been challenged intellectually in that way. And it was an area that I just never had heard of. And so that captured my interest. And so once I kind of had that foundation back in, 2012, I think is when I graduated from college. And then, I studied abroad in Australia and worked with the Noongar community in Western Australia. And, but I decided that, higher education was my area of passion. I wanted to work with Indigenous students as they go into college. And so I got my master's, of course, in higher and post-secondary education, focusing on like graduate and professional students. And then my doctorate was focused on graduation experiences with undergraduates. So it always did.
And you did all this at a stretch, like no break or anything?
I did take 2 years off, and I was a classroom teacher. I taught second grade for a little while. I don't know if that's taking 2 years off.
PhD, that's like what, 5-6 years, undergrad 4 years, master's 2 years. That's like 11 or 12 years of studying.
Yeah. I'm just
piece of cake, right? so I can do this again.
I didn't cry all the time.
Is that a thing? Like, I have a lot of PhD students who encourage me to like apply for a PhD. Like one of them, I think I actually applied to Delaware, but I didn't end up going. But I was like, look, like all my PhD students, I've witnessed them calling me at one point in time talking about philosophical stuff. Like it's 1 a.m. in the morning. It's like, no, sir, what's the purpose of life? Like this PhD thing, if we think about it, like getting all philosophical. I mean, like, dude, I'm sleeping, man.
That's when the best ideas happen, is like 1 a.m. in the morning.
Got it. And what was your thesis on for your PhD?
That was on Native American. I'm trying to think of the entire title. I'm always like, just look it up, but no. It's like graduation data for undergraduate students and student service. So I was trying to understand like the correlation between our graduation rates and impact from university staff, university faculty. So yeah, that was my doctoral studies. And now I'm at Yale, and I manage the Native American Cultural Center here.
There's a Native American Cultural Center at Yale?
There is.
Nice.
Yeah. Surprising, right?
And what does the center do? Because I know there are all the centers, like we have where I went to school in America, we had the anti-racism center. I was like, that's interesting. Given the fact that you see bananas floating on campus every now and then. But what does the Native American Center at Yale do?
So we're really a hub for our Indigenous students. That's really what it is. It's a place for our Indigenous students to come together, create community, and we try to share, our cultural events or knowledge, but we also invite our allies to be there with us. So it is it's a place for students, for the Yale community, but we also invite others, and we invite community members, faculty to join us there. And I manage the building, I supervise students, and I do a lot of the programming.
Nice. And obviously from going to school so long, like you understood the college setting so you can like put younger students through. But while you were in college, I mean, you went to what, Northern Arizona for undergrad? You went to, where did you go for your master's and PhD?
Arizona State was for my master's, and then I went to the University of Southern California.
Oh, wow. Those are 3 different schools. Usually like someone who just goes straight to PhD usually does it at one school. But what was like your experience like, especially like in California, being Native American? Was it different? You mentioned how going to a tribal high school kind of like prepared you for the college experience in a way. How was your experience as a Native American? How much did you miss home while in college?
I mean, my time in Arizona, I had family around all the time. I could just go back to the Navajo Nation pretty frequently. But with USC, it was a little different. I had some pretty interesting experiences that were very frustrating, because you want to believe that, people at a certain level are, know how to behave themselves, or like know how to.
Never.
I guess my expectations are way too high.
Never.
But, I was at USC, and I remember like I had my hair in a siish, so which is like a Navajo bun. Mm-hmm. And
you have like a pin in there as well, or you just have like the bun?
It's a certain, you might be able to look it up if you ever get to, if you look up Navajo bun, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but you like use yarn to wrap your hair. And I had my hair in a Navajo bun, in a CS, and I had a skirt on, and I had my moccasins on, and it was just kind of this blend of like, clothes, but also my mocks and my hair was nicely wrapped and stuff. And one of my cohort members, asked me if I was a native enthusiast. And I was just like,
wait. That was California, right? That sounds Californian.
I was so taken aback.
Oh, goodness me, a native enthusiast.
It was so bizarre. I asked him, I was like, are you serious? And then he goes, yeah. And I could just see it in his face. Like he was calculating what he was just asking me. And I had to explain to him, I'm like, I'm Native American. I'm like, I don't know what else to tell you, but not an enthusiast. I also had another young man ask me, or no, he was laughing with me. And then he just goes, oh, you look like Pocahontas. And I looked at him with all seriousness. And I was just like, don't call me that. And then he goes, no, I'm just saying you're beautiful. You look like Pocahontas. And I'm like, seriously, I need you to stop calling me that. And it was just so infuriating that I was still trying to navigate these conversations with an adult,
Mm-hmm.
It was
as an immigrant, like I always ask myself, how much do we forgive? Like, how much do we chalk up to ignorance? Or because at a point, like you get tired of like correcting or explaining, and some people's approach might be somewhat innocent just by the way they deliver a certain message. Maybe they don't know that thing is inappropriate, or that word or that gesture or that act or whatever. But I find myself asking that question, like, should I, like, do I chalk it up to ignorance, or do I like spaz out on this person, or do I use it as a teachable moment? Like, it's pretty interesting. Like you're trying to educate yourself while you're in college, but you find yourself educating other people. And the average American, if I can say this myself, from what I've observed, isn't too, like, whenever I talk to people about my podcast, for instance, like Nigeria is a country of like almost 400 different tribes. My dad was in the military. Like, I'm from a multicultural family. So like interacting with different cultures, I'm, fairly well traveled. So it's not new to me, but I think it is for the average American. Like, I don't know how many people like actually venture out there. I think there was a study I read once that less than 30% or 40% of Americans have international passports. Most people just like live in one state. And because everyone is trying to, most people speak two languages, like they speak the American language and they speak their language. Like, maybe Americans think that it's not just necessary to learn other languages. And when I say language, I mean, a cultural identity, or, how other groups of people, kind of like act. But it's pretty interesting. I guess, it is what it is. Do our best to build a sense of community within our immediate community and educate those who are willing, which is honestly why this podcast is here. We're trying our best to, for those interested listeners who are interested about learning about other things, we're kind of like here for them. But let me ask this: within the Native American culture, I don't know, I must have said I'm Nigerian on this podcast like 100 times, but I'm going to keep going back to that. Like, in Nigeria as well, we have tribalism, funny enough. So there's racism on one hand, there's tribalism that even amongst a nation of Black people, besides the classism talk, which is in every nation, you have people saying that, oh, this tribe, 400 or 500 years ago, this is what happened. So this is how we tag these people. Those people are over there. The people from the north are over here. The people from the south are over there. Are there things like that between tribes in the Native American community, where you have cases of tribalism or historic cases of either discrimination or things like that amongst different tribes within the Native American community?
I know that gets brought up every now and then between certain tribes. Like, it'll come up, usually jokingly, about how certain tribes were enemies at some point. But a good example of like sort of a fairly recent tension, I think it might even it probably exists still today, but like between the Navajos and the Hopis. But that truly is a result of colonization. It was because, someone was trying to draw these lines, this is your land and this is, the Hopis' land. And all of a sudden we're like, what? Like, it's sort of just drawing there. It was as if they were designing it so that we would fight each other, and not be mad at who is drawing the lines, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of like sounds like the Berlin Conference where they divided Africa into 52 states or countries or whatever.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not up to my history in that regard, but I will say that I'm learning a lot because I could have mentioned this earlier, but I'm teaching a class this spring.
Okay.
At Yale, and it's Indigenous cultures in a global context. And I'm doing 4 units where I study, we focus on indigeneity in Australia, South America, North America, and Africa. And so I've been trying to, I would say that, Africa has been difficult for me because I just, it's completely been off my radar for most of my life in studying Indigenous peoples. But so when you were talking about tribalism from, Nigeria, that was really interesting for me because I'm currently still learning about it.
I mean, Africa is so diverse. It's not one place, but hey, all you need to do is like buy a plane ticket or something. I don't know if you do any field study, maybe not now during the pandemic, but like eventually. But yeah, a few minutes ago, you mentioned like different things, like you talked about the moccasins. I had no idea that is that Native American origination, the moccasins?
I believe so. I mean, that's what we
invention.
Call them. I mean, it's essentially just, the kind of shoes we wore. There's
because there's an actual brand called moccasins, right? Like a fashion brand called moccasins, and it was very popular while I was growing up in Nigeria. I don't know how popular it is here, but I asked that to ask, when you hear about, like stickball, lacrosse, moccasins, the mohawk hairstyle, things like that. When you see things like that in pop culture and, with the Native American enthusiasts and things like that, do you get like infuriated saying that, hey, these things have significant meaning, they're part of certain rituals and they shouldn't be taken as a fashion item? Or do you feel more proud that, hey, this is people not indigenous to our culture but embracing our culture? I guess maybe it's a bit of both. I don't know, but what is it for you?
Yeah, it's a really difficult conversation to navigate. I did not know that there was a company called Moccasins. I'll just say that because, moccasins look different, like Kiowa and Comanche moccasins look completely different from Navajo moccasins or Hopi moccasins, like the Pueblos.
It might be a European brand. Maybe it's not American. I don't know where it comes from, but I know it was super popular like when I was kind of like in high school or primary school or something in Nigeria specifically.
Yeah, appropriation is a huge topic within Native American communities now, and it's something that a lot of people within, I feel like I always think about it like my Facebook feed and my Instagram feed that probably just looks completely different from, the person sitting next to me. And, it's a big conversation that we have or that I see within the people that I follow, that appropriation is just, it's thriving in a lot of these spaces. And it's unfortunate because they're taking, design and inspiration from Native people, but taking all the profit and giving no credit to Indigenous communities.
Fact. I guess that's popular in capitalism for the most part. Like a lot of people just look for ways to make money out of certain cultures and maybe not necessarily either paying reverence to that culture or explaining with the history behind what you're doing or even like kind of like giving back to that culture in a way. But talk to me about some of the other communities that you've kind of like had a chance to interact with. That might be through travel. I know you talked about Western Australia. That might be through your education in those different papers you wrote at 1 a.m. during your PhD or things like that. Or like what other places have you gone to? What other communities have you interacted with? And has there been something that, you didn't really know until you got into the books or you went there about a certain tribe or country or community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening with Indigenous communities across the world. Australia really opened my eyes in a lot of ways. It was the first time I got called a Yankee. And I was like, I got called a Yankee while I was in Australia.
Interesting.
I was like, what? I was like so upset. But, because I was working with a lot of the Indigenous Australian people there. I saw a lot of like firsthand just the racism, the blatant racism that was occurring for that community in Perth, Australia. So that was that, and it was like a kind of like in your face kind of thing. And I hadn't experienced that in a while. But while I was there, I also went to Bali, Indonesia, and that was more so for fun. But everyone there thought I was a local person, which was interesting. They thought I was like giving a tour to American people. I was with two friends of mine.
Interesting.
And that's interesting in itself because it made me think a little bit deeper about the way that tourism impacts Indigenous people. So I remember as a young child, a friend of mine, I met her at a College Horizons, which is a program that helps Native students get into college. And she was telling me about the struggles of tourism in the Hawaiian Islands. And she told me that, she said it's really tough. Like they just come here for, this certain experience, and they create a lot of trash and all these things. And oh my gosh. And I told her, I was like, is there anything I can do? I asked her, I was probably like 16 at the time. And I was like, is there anything I can do to help you? And she was like, don't ever come to the islands. And I was like, that's fair. So yeah, that was a really interesting conversation coming from another young person. And so I try to think about it in that way. And unless I have like a purpose, like say I'm, going to somewhere to impact an Indigenous community in some way, or like being invited somewhere, not really going for touristy kind of reasons, that I really want to think about the impact that it's having for certain communities.
It's interesting you said that. You mentioned Indonesia because there was a girl who trended on Twitter a few days ago specifically about going to Bali. She was kind of like breaking, I think she had a YouTube channel or something. She was kind of like breaking down the steps on how you can go to Indonesia during the pandemic. And, it's, with your average salary, you can be there. And then all these Indonesians kind of like flooded the thread and like, we're talking about how tourists come here and the city is getting more and more expensive for them who are locals, and like restaurateurs and, people in the service industry don't treat them well because they are not foreign and they are not carrying dollars like the tourists are, and how it's just affecting their economy, and they're kind of like being pushed out of their own land. It's interesting you said that, someone from Hawaii kind of like telling you that. And I interviewed someone on this podcast from Jamaica, and she was kind of like saying the same thing as well. So I guess there's a flip side to tourism that, in a sense, even though it brings in some kind of revenue, it's not most tourist programs might not be structured in a way where it ensures that, some of that money is flowing back and there's active participation, kind of like in a sense, because you have, some investors like from China and different places going to invest in hotels and all these places, and they're not even from that land, and they're making all the tourist dollars and things like that. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. I guess problems like that will never really fade away. But let me ask you this, like, what do you think, like, we're on a podcast, right? What do you think Americans, should I say Americans, let me narrow it down to Americans, need to understand more about the Native American community? Like, is there a certain misconception out there? I know we talked about the scholarship thing. Is there a way to interact respectfully with the traditions and, cultures that emanate from the Native American community? Is there just something you wish you could snap your finger and, people stop doing or do less of, or even do more of, on the flip side, concerning like Native Americans?
Man, that's a big question. Let's see. Wow. There's a lot. I'm thinking of so many different things. If I could snap my fingers and something, I'm like thinking about, I'm already thinking of like 1491, like turn those boats around, go back to where they came from. I mean, given where we are today, gosh, if I could snap my fingers, I would really just, dang, that's so hard. I would truly wish that the educational system in the United States was different. If I could snap my fingers, I wish that history was written by Native people. McGraw-Hill is not doing anyone, any benefit by the way that they have designed their history and their curriculum.
Facts.
So that's what I'm thinking of.
And that's with everything. That's with the Native American story. That's with the Confederacy. That's with slavery. That's with everything.
Yeah, I think that I think we'd have, it wouldn't be like the end all be all, but I think we might be having different conversations if that were.
We have a saying where I come from, that the saying goes like this, that until a lion learns to speak English, the story will always favor the hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's kind of like self-explanatory in that sense. But but hey, America, I guess, has done a good job in the PR and publicity around the world. Thanks to Hollywood and Silicon Valley and all these places. Like, you think America is kind of like a place, this is me talking as an immigrant, paved with flowing with milk and honey and whatnot. And even though there are, economic opportunities in this country, you come here and you just see systems that are broken left, right, and center, and you just start to imagine, wow, that this is crazy. This is even me who, has a home to go back to. Like, I can identify what village I come from. I can identify my lineage. But there are some people, like African Americans in particular, who don't even have that. And they're just trapped, kind of like in a system that doesn't like have the best for them as, Native Americans, I guess, in a way as well. But it's pretty bad. Like, what do you think? What do you want to do? How do you think you can change some of this? How do you think you can chip away in some of this problem? Do you think education is the way you can give back? Just continue telling those stories, making sure younger people who come up just realize things and maybe being that bridge between like Americans and Native Americans? Or do you think there are other ways? Do you think economic empowerment is the way, like what we're having with the casinos, like more of that? Like, what do you think is the way to reduce some of those gaps?
Yeah, I think the way that I, as a grown adult now, I'm trying to be an adult, but
we all are.
I feel like I'm trying to, I guess, fill the world with the way that I understand myself. I want the world that Indigenous peoples today can look this way and still be Native, and they are filled with Westerns. They're filled with romantic ideas of what Native people are. And I mean, with the recent Capitol domestic terrorism, that individual who had the fur on his head and stuff, he claimed he got it from a Navajo. It is completely false. No one from the Indigenous community claims him.
He did?
He claims it was like from a Navajo something or other. And
wait, is it the same guy who says he eats organic food and he needs organic food in prison? That dude?
Yeah.
How those guys weren't shot? I don't know.
I mean, that's a whole other thing. But everyone, in the Indigenous world was very upset and offended. Shook by that. But I mean, I am trying to fill. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I do have a YouTube channel where I talk about being a Native person and talking about the college experience and tips for Native students who are thinking of going to grad school or going into a doctorate. And it's only because, I want to be able to provide my story of what it's been like for me. And also because not a lot of Native people, not a lot, but I feel like I want to be a part of that community where we're talking more about like us today and not allowing stories of the past to really like be our main story. And that's why I really appreciate like Indigenous fashion designers, Indigenous movie makers, all of those individuals. They're helping to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. And, hopefully, we'll have the link to our YouTube channel in the episode show notes. So if you want to check out more of that, we can do that as well. I guess we all have a role to play regardless of where we find ourselves in, whether that's in education, whether that's in business, technology. We can always do something and even though some of these challenges might not be resolved or might not be ever resolved, but we can always make things better, chip away at things, We're recording this on January the 19th, the day before the inauguration. And even though, like, historically, the U.S. hasn't been fair to, like, Native Americans, we can only hope that can get better with each, administration in the coming years, particularly, like, with this administration, which is not the last administration, I'll leave it at that. But, well, man, I'm sorry, you guys, if, you guys came here, and I'm talking to my listeners, thinking of, having like a documentary form, like very philosophical or educational questions. My style, like I try to have a casual conversation with my guests, throwing some jokes in there, and hopefully that way pass some important information. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Diana. I always like to give my guests like a couple of minutes at the end of the episode to like say something. Like, you have the floor. Like, if you want to just like drop your social media, I know you talked about your YouTube channel, or you want to give like a last word of advice, or you want to speak to yourself in the future, whatever it is, you kind of have the floor to do that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think about a lot of the movements that Indigenous peoples are doing, whether it's for Mother Earth, or if it's for land rights, or clean water, wherever it might be. I always think of Tupac Katari and his quote of being, he was doing the same thing, and he said, I die as one, but when I return in the millions. And I think that that's something that Indigenous peoples have always known. Like, we know that we believe in our communities and our values, and we're going to continue to fight for them no matter what it takes.
Got it. Most definitely. And can you please wrap up like the episode with your mother tongue? Maybe just say, thank you for having me, goodbye, that kind of thing.
Let's see. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves. Means take care of yourself. And hogone. Bye.
Hogone? There we go.
Hogone.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I just butchered that. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. As usual, follow us everywhere. It's Culture Class Podcast. Check out our website. Drop a voice note. Tell us what you think about the episode. Check out Diana's YouTube channel as well. Say hello to her on social media. And stop asking her if she's a Native American enthusiast. For Christ's sakes, people, behave. All right, guys. Till next time, be well.